Let me look that up. So according to Google, and we know how accurate Google is, but it's a great way to fact check, a small percentage of Christian pastors hold degrees in psychology. One study indicated that only 10% or 1 out of 10 pastors reported having a graduate degree in counseling or psychology, while 38% has taken a graduate level course in counseling. This suggests that the minority of pastors have formal training in psychology beyond a basic theology degree. Another study mentioned that 25% of pastors have some formal training in pastoral counseling, while the majority of 75% do not. And if you want to know the website for some of those statistics, it's National Institute of Health, also known as NIH.gov. Now, there is nothing wrong with counseling people in a degree you have. If you have a doctorate or master's in theology, as long as you meet the state requirements and city requirements in which you live, you can ethically, morally, and legally provide services for theology. If you don't have at least a master's degree in psychology, you shouldn't be offering mental health services. The problem is very few people are aware of the state licensure requirements. Some pastors actually, intentional or not, I won't speak for everyone, but there is what I call an air of education that people in churches of senior leadership with theology degrees sometimes use to get people to believe they're more qualified than they really are. There is a level of what I call power imbalance authority where especially women who are married go to pastors for what I would call mental health and legal questions. Pastors are not the right type of people to go to for those issues. If you're not safe, if you're in a domestic violence or an unhealthy environment, go to a doctor or a psychologist. The church is built on the patriarchy. The church usually, consistently looks after the best interest of the men in church. At least now, since 2025, a lot more churches are stepping up, not consistently, but much more frequently than 20 years ago. When I grew up at the turn of the century, there was definitely more pastors who took advantage of women in positions of vulnerability. And it wasn't for sexual reasons. It was spiritual abuse. They would use their authority to get women to stay with abusers, put up with abuse, and not go to the police. Now let's talk about the different ways pastors counsel people. If you grew up in purity culture, a lot of pastors and senior and junior male members of leadership would teach the belief that young people who are unmarried must be celibate and abstinence only. Now, we talked about this in another episode. There's nothing wrong with being abstinent your whole life. Regardless if you're asexual, heterosexual, gay, gender fluid, if you don't want to ever have sex, there is nothing wrong with that. The problem is when you're in a high control religion where that's the only acceptable option for existing. If it's something you want to do, you're happy about it, and it makes your life better, and it's right for you, no one has a right to say otherwise, provided it's legal and ethical. But when you grow up in very high control religions, they won't let you. And a lot of people, especially women in vulnerable situations, married or not, are very susceptible to coercion, manipulation, and spiritual abuse. When you believe in divine gender roles and men are in charge, women are less than, even though they say they're not, the Bible says otherwise. When you're taught that you are basically created to serve men and to not make waves. If a woman comes forward and says that her husband has a porn addiction, a mistress, or is behaving violently, an institution based solely on cis heterosexual male privilege is not a place that women are going to be consistently kept safe before, during, and after illegal or unethical situations. And when pastors give off the vibe or the language that they use their doctoral title to mean more than it does, we get into an ethical dilemma. If you don't have the highest degrees and licenses for doing behavior, stick to your own lane. Stick to what you're allowed to do. And biblical counseling isn't just about marriage and relationships. It's about counseling young people. So purity culture, a very toxic environment, has been used to control, shame, and traumatize people. That doesn't mean everyone or their bodies respond and treat it like trauma, but it's still damaging. 1 out of 3 people who grow up in purity culture develops mild or severe symptoms of trauma. Very common in women, and we talked about this in another video. So how do pastors deal or resolve issues when somebody doesn't fit the cis heteronormative expectation role? Well, there's what I call conversion therapy. And if you're not aware of conversion therapy, it's basically been outlawed in 1 out of 3 states. I wish it was outlawed everywhere. But conversion therapy is a harmful, ineffective practice. It's also known as reparative therapy. It's a term that refers to any emotional or physical intervention used to change a person's sexual orientation or gender identity and expression. These practices are rooted in pseudo-scientific belief that homosexuality and gender diversity are pathological conditions that need to be cured or repaired, a premise rejected by the scientific and medical community. So what are the dangers and harms when pastors and leaders in the church recommend things like conversion therapy, or that being gay is a mental illness, or that you're not a good person because you practice these kind of behaviors? Homophobia is extremely rampant. Sexism, any form of racism can be extremely rampant. And according to scientific consensus, is that conversion therapy is ineffective at changing orientation, gender identity, causing significant, long-lasting psychological harm, according to Wikipedia. Organizations like the Human Rights Campaign, the HRC, highlights that these practices are dangerous and discredited. The harms associated with conversion therapy are substantial, and here are a few of the issues. Mental health issues, depression, anxiety, substance abuse, suicidal ideation and attempts, and post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, are common negative mental health outcomes due to conversion therapy. Family rejection. Conversion therapy can encourage family rejection, undermining a young person's self-esteem, sense of belonging, and autonomy, which are vital factors against suicidal thoughts and actions, according to the Trevor Project. If every member of the LGBTQ plus organization, if their parents accepted, supported, and were basically acting like healthy, mature parents, 93% of the suicidal attempts of queer people would not happen. Social stigma. Reinforcing prejudice, conversion therapy exacerbates social stigma and puts individuals at a higher risk for various negative outcomes, according to the Southern Poverty Law Center. Economic burden. A 2022 study found that conversion therapy and its associated harms cost the U.S. an estimated $9.23 billion every year due to factors like increased substance abuse and mental health issues. So what about the scientific and medical consensus? Conversion therapy has been rejected by every mainstream medical and mental health organization for decades. Organizations such as the American Psychological Association, the American Psychiatric Association, and the World Psychiatric Association are critical of conversion therapy and advocate against its use. An increasing number of places have passed laws against conversion therapy, particularly for minors. As of January 2024, 22 states, that's less than half, and the District of Columbia have banned conversion therapy for anyone under 18, with additional states having partial bans. These laws prohibit licensed medical health practitioners from subjecting LGBTQ plus minors to these harmful practices, but may not restrict practices by religious clergy or other non-state licensed individuals. Instead of conversion therapy, organizations like the Trevor Project empathize the importance of affirming environments, which have been shown to improve mental health outcomes and reduce the risk of suicide among everyone in the LGBTQ plus youth. You can't change someone's orientation. You can only change people's minds, people's opinions, people's beliefs. Conversion therapy is dangerous because